Doing well. Don't feel quite so tipsy today. Maybe a little bit, I don't know, got a little bit in the back, a little bit in the middle, a little bit in the front. It's kind of neat. I like that. You guys, I don't know, you trying to say something, you all have cards you're going to have pulled up later, like in the stands, and spell something. I don't know. You know, I think we're all looking for our 15 minutes of fame. Charlie, did you have your 15 minutes of fame yet? Oh, okay. All right. I think a lot of people look for those moments that they are important. That they are like, whew, I've made it. I have left my mark and people will remember me. I think a lot of people today want to leave that mark. They want to have 15 minutes of fame somewhere, somehow, and I think a lot of our culture is built on that. A lot of those shows that we have, the ones that are the real life shows, like Survivor and X Factor and America's Got Talent and those kind of things, are ways that we give each other the opportunity to stand on a stage and do our best in front of everyone else. Or, at times, do our worst. And some people are known for doing their worst on shows like that. Matter of fact, they get their own show for doing their worst, maybe at singing or at dancing or whatever they were doing. We have all of these shows and things that want to be there to make people important. I'm sure many of you have tried out, right? Anybody here tried out America's Got Talent? No? Not yet? Okay. Look forward to seeing Carol, maybe Kathy there, you guys up there playing. No? Okay. Maybe a duet with Evelyn. You guys can get your 15 minutes of fame. But our culture is so saturated with searching for this fame, for this feeling of significance, it's almost like it's part of the internet as well. I mean, if you put a video on there, you kind of hope that a lot of people will view it. And if a lot of people view it, then it does this thing called going viral. It becomes something that everybody has seen and talks about around the water cooler. People look for significance. I don't know about you, but I want to be significant. I want to do something that makes a difference. I want to do something that's exciting and fantastic. I remember being part of a group in high school that went down to Springfield, Illinois. And we went to the Capitol. We went into the Senate chambers, and as students, we had a mock Senate for a weekend. We were all senators from different counties, and we got to, or different areas, and we got to work on a bill. And the bill we were working on was one that I thought was rather interesting for me, coming from private Christian school. And many people thought it was a really neat opportunity. The bill had to do with abortion rights. Had to do with the length of time someone had to wait before they got an abortion and whether or not they had to tell their parents. And it was a very interesting discussion and rather heated, even though, you know, nothing real was going to happen. But we as students wanted to do our best. Well, I got put on this committee. And I'm a rat, you know, you look at me today, you go, Joe, you have no problem speaking in front of people. Well, I do still have a fear that I've had for a long time. I've had a little bit of fear and anxiety when it comes to speaking in front of people. And man, back then it was horrible. Palms sweaty, head sweaty, worse than it is now. I need like my holy towel during the sermon now. But back then, I got really nervous. Well, I really didn't want to speak up and say much of anything. But somebody thought it might be a good idea if I proposed something in the full Senate, an amendment to the bill, that I should add it. Now, normally I would have said no thanks. I really don't want to do that. I don't want to stand up in front of people and have to speak and, excuse me, chairman, or whatever I needed to do. But this other person that was there that that particularly was asking me to do this, she was kind of cute and had some blonde hair, and I was like, whatever you say, I'm going to do it, because you're really pretty. So I was like, all right, I'll stand up and do it. I'll go through this. We ended up getting our bill with the amendment passed, and I did end up standing up and saying what I needed to say. However, when we had free time later after we had done some of the work, she never talked to me again. So she was someone that learned how to work a room. She's probably in politics now. She learned how to get done what she wanted to get done. But that was a place where I was significant. For a few moments, everybody in the room was looking at me and paying attention. Although we may want to be significant, we may want to do great things, our lives are not made up of great things. Our lives are not filled with one great thing after another. It's not like we're climbing Mount Everest and Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens. I don't know why you combined that. Anyway, Mount Fuji. It's not like we're climbing all kinds of different mountains to be significant. We're not constantly, every day, going for that next big thing. Maybe Dennis is. I haven't checked in with him. He might be going for that next big thing. But a lot of us, we just go through life. Everyday stuff. And I think many of us look at that everyday stuff and realize, those everyday things are what I am doing to mount up to be significant. We're doing all of these things, going to work, mowing the lawn, washing the car, so that at the end of our lives, we will have something that is recognized, that is significant. Some of it is we hope our kids will do great things. We want to train them up to do wonderful things. Like I want my son to be a famous baseball pitcher so I can live off him when I get older. But we want our kids to be raised well. We want them to care about us in our old age. We want people to come and visit us when we get older. We don't want to be there by ourselves. We want to still have significance. Today we're going to take a look at Isaac and his faith. Last week we talked about Abraham. Isaac is his son. And when I say Isaac, what comes to mind for you? What comes to mind for us? Isaac isn't one of those people that we really remember a lot about. Do you remember his significance? What great battles he won, or what great promises he kept, or what feats of strength he did? Strangely enough, I bet the things that we remember about Isaac are things that we remember about other people that were around Isaac. We remember things about Isaac like Abraham sacrificing him on an altar. We remember that. We know Isaac was there. But really, that was Abraham's story. We also remember stuff about Isaac being fooled by Jacob and giving the birthright that belonged to Esau to Jacob and giving him that blessing. Maybe we also remember his marriage to Rebekah and how Abraham sent out his servant to go find Rebekah, and Rebekah came back and married Isaac. But the point here is that there isn't a lot significant about Isaac. A lot of stuff happened around him, but he didn't do a lot. If you read the story of Isaac, a lot of the most significant things he did was build wells. How many of us are excited about stories of great Christians in the past that built wells? Woo! It's exciting, isn't it? He had sheep. No, I don't see. Nobody's jumping up and down yet. Nobody's really excited. Significance. Isaac is a person of faith that it would be easy to fly right over. We could go right on by him and not even notice he was there. But for some reason, God felt he was significant enough to be named all of the time as almost part of God's name. If somebody went around at the time of Jesus and went, I believe in God, and somebody said, which God? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Isaac got in there. He was pretty significant. Even though he might have been like the flyover word in there. You know, it's like Abraham and Jacob. Oh yeah, Isaac. We'll toss him in too. But Isaac's faith, even though it seemed not very significant, had some good, great, fantastic things we could learn from him. So there are a few scriptures I've pulled out that I want to look at to see what was Isaac's faith life like. So there's about 4 of them. Let's go through those. First one comes from Genesis 24. It will be up here on the screen. Genesis 24, 62 to 63. The shortest passage that I pulled out, but nonetheless very significant. Verse 62. Now Isaac had come from Beer-lahai, for he was living in the Negev. He went out to the field one evening to meditate, and he looked up and he saw camels approaching. You almost might feel like I left out some kind of punchline there. Like, what happened next? They rode up and he beat them all up and he won the battle. No, that isn't quite what happened next. It is significant what happened next, but we're going to stop here for the first part of Isaac's significant faith. Isaac's father had sent a servant out looking for his wife for him. And she was actually on her way back, and that's what the camels are. It's a caravan bringing his wife back to him. But we can easily jump right on past this little passage and go on and talk about Isaac and Rebekah and their marriage. We could just go right on. But there is something so important that I think makes such a difference for Isaac's faith right here. And that is that he went out to the field one evening to meditate. Maybe he went out there to meditate on, oh, Rebekah's coming back. Maybe he went out there to meditate on, man, I wish the crops came in better. Maybe he went out there to meditate on, boy, it's really hot in my house, so I'm going to go out and meditate in the field. Not sure exactly what he went out to meditate on, but because of the word that is used, it is likely he went out to meditate / pray to God. It is very likely that he went out there to talk to God about what was going on in his life. Maybe he was like, God, prepare me for this crazy woman that this servant is bringing back. I don't know what this is going to be like. But to some degree, in reading just this short sentence, it also feels normal. I think this is a normal practice of Isaac, that he would go out to the field and meditate and talk to God and be with him. A lot of us struggle with the everyday things and looking at them as they're significant. But this might be the most significant building block of Isaac's faith. That every night he went out there, talked to God. Maybe it wasn't every night. Maybe every night he could get out there. He went, spent some time alone with God. He could have been at his bachelor party getting ready for Rebekah to come back, but he was out there talking with God. This was a man whose faith was important to him, enough that he spent time alone, away from stuff. How often do we spend time alone, away from stuff? I'm going to put my phone down, I'm going to put the checkbook down, I'm going to put the TV down, and I'm going to put the house down. I'm walking out into the yard and I'm going to talk with God. He made an effort to go be with God. And I believe this is a building block for a faith that made his life significant. He spent time talking and listening to God. While it's not very flashy, it's a significant discipline to have for his life. The next part of Isaac's life really happens just after what we read. I'm going to kind of try to bring a little bit more of the story of Rebekah in now by going back to Genesis 24, verses 1 through 4, and then jumping back to where we were at Genesis 24, 64 to 67. So first, Genesis 24. Abraham was now old and well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. He said to the chief servant in his household, the one in charge of all that he had, "Put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I am living, but will go to my country and my own relatives and get a wife for my son Isaac." And then moving forward to Genesis 24, 64 through 67. Rebekah also looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel and asked the servant, "Who is that man in the field coming to meet us?" "He is my master," the servant answered. So she took her veil and covered herself. Then the servant told Isaac all that he had done. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Isaac accepted the wife his father had picked for him. How many of you would accept your mate from what your dad picked for you? If your dad had picked someone for you, would you go, "Woo, this is going to be great"? Or would you go, "Oh my goodness"? Would you be married to the person you're married to now? Would you like the person maybe that you like now? Would you let your parents do that? Did they have a part in how your marriage came about? For many of us, we'd hear that, having our parents pick our mate, and we'd go with William Wallace of Braveheart and say, "Freedom! We don't want somebody picking our mate for us. We want to do it ourselves. We want to date people. We want to get to know them. We want to find out the things we like and we don't like. And then eventually, maybe, in our culture, get married the way we want to." Having our parents pick someone for us, that's ridiculous. Now, I did think about this a bit, and I thought, who would my mom have picked for me? And I think about that, and actually I probably know the answer really quick. Her name was Debbie. She was all right, got to know her. She was actually my first date ever, and only date ever with her. Anyway, but we had known each other growing up, that kind of thing. She was the daughter of my mom's best friend. That's how it goes, right? You want to hook up your best friend's kid with your kid, and then it'll be beautiful, right? So I think about that, and I go, man, I don't know if that would have worked out well. It definitely wouldn't have been Allie, and I appreciate that I had the opportunity to choose for myself, but I'll be the first to say I didn't choose alone. I was not in a vacuum. Many of you have heard me say that if it wasn't for this lawyer, Dave Hagler, at the church that I was at, I never would have dated Allison. I would have said, well, I did say, "What are you talking about, Dave? You going crazy? You speaking in tongues again?" I wasn't sure, so I had to check in with him. But what I've learned in my faith is that to have God's best, it's important to have trust in your family. Both the family of faith that God has put around you and your family. here we have kind of a beautiful picture of a trust that Isaac has in his father. He trusts his father, and it was probably part of the culture. But I bet that Isaac probably still had veto power. That he could have said, hey, all right, I'll marry you, but I'll put you in a tent down the road. Why don't you go live over there? I'll be married to you, and I'll pick somebody else that I like better. But he didn't. They grew to love one another. And they did that because Isaac trusted his father. His father trusted his servant, and he trusted that the woman that God would produce for his son would be a wonderful woman. Today, especially in our culture, we might say it takes a lot of faith for me to trust God for my spouse rather than me dating. But what if we had trust and faith like Isaac for some of the most important decisions in life? As we move on in Isaac's faith, I want to turn to Genesis 25, verses 19 through 21, where it says this about Isaac. This is the account of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. 40 years old, that's a long time to wait. Even if you can live till you're 130. 40 years is a long time to wait for your wife. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel and the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. Now, we all talked about just last Sunday, Abraham and Sarah. And they couldn't have a child. Well, here the same thing happens for Isaac. God, you have promised. Where is my kid? Let's go. I wonder how many times Isaac had to sit around the campfire and listen to his dad tell the story about how he came to be. Although when you think about the story, he may not have told all of it. Just the happy part where eventually they did have Isaac. Probably would leave out the Ishmael stuff. But Isaac probably heard that story about God coming to the tent and promising Abraham, and Abraham saying, what? And Sarah laughing, and God saying, you know what, this time next year you'll be pregnant. And that God was faithful because there was this promise. This thing that needed to happen, that God said, I'm going to work this out. You're going to have descendants that as a nation will bless the world. And he would probably heard it over and over again. So when it came to him having a child, he was probably like, God, what are you doing? Apparently you can't make stuff work very well, God. What's going on? You're 2 for 2 here and us having to ask for help. But I bet Isaac had learned to have faith. That this God who is strong in his dad's life and his mom's life could be just as strong in his life. That Isaac was a child of promise, and that he knew that he would have a child of promise. And he lived into the promise, and he trusted. He had faith not only in God, but in his dad. I mean, who wouldn't have to have faith? Finally, Dad, after 40 years, you're going to go out and get me a wife. It's about time. What have you been waiting for? He had to trust and have faith in his dad. He waited those 40 years, and shoot, what's waiting a little bit longer to have a son? Isaac picked up on Abraham's example of faith, and maybe in a little bit less pronounced way, he did it right without complaining and laughing at God's promise. Finally, the last thing I want to mention about Isaac's faith comes from Genesis 26, 1 through 6. It says, "Now there was a famine in the land, besides the earlier famine of Abraham's time, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, 'Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the skies, and will give them all these lands. And through your offspring, all the nations on the earth will be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed me and kept my requirements, my commands, my decrees, and my laws.' So Isaac stayed in Gerar." Finally, we find that Isaac's faith kept him where he was supposed to be. Isaac could have given up on the promise. He was at a point where he said, I'm looking at the reality of life here, God. I'm looking at a famine. It could have been like some of us the other day. My wife and I and kids went out yesterday and looked at the flood. I mean, what if you guys went out on, Thursday, walked outside and you were in one of those houses in the lowlands? And you went, still raining. Water's coming. I mean, what would you do? Would you go, oh, well, just going to stay here. It'll be okay. Isaac looked at the circumstances in his life. He looked at where God had him. How many of us look at our circumstances and go, maybe we need to do this with our lives, or maybe we need to do this. But Isaac, rather than just looking at his circumstances and bolting for Egypt and going, I'm heading to Egypt, this is ridiculous. I don't want people to starve and die. I want my flocks, my herds, my people, I got to take care of them, and the circumstances dictate that I go. But all those years before, Isaac had gone out in that field to meditate. And in that discipline of meditation, he learned the voice of God. And he heard not the circumstances screaming at him, get out of the way. He heard God talking to him. A God who said, hey, I've got a promise. I'm going to work it out my way. You stay put. You stay where I have planted you. Isaac was probably thinking, God, if you want me to be significant, it is going to be hard for me to be significant and dead. But God said, stay where you are. And the most important part is, Isaac stayed. Isaac listened to God and said, hey, I'm going to stay right here. Do we take those promises of God into our own heart and life like Isaac did? Do we know what they are? Do we go, this gospel that you have put before me, it's a gospel. What does gospel mean? Where am I going with that? What is your promise to me? Or do we go, you know what? I have an eternity to live into. I have a promise that this little bit that I live on here will go into forever beyond this, and that's what I'm living into. Not today, not this moment. I'm living to know the voice of God so that when I get to heaven, it's easy to understand. I won't be confused anymore. Because I heard him on earth, I know what it'll sound like in heaven. Isaac understood his voice. Folks, the story of Isaac is one we could hop right over. Probably have read over it several times, maybe at your dinner table, and you go, oh, Isaac, yeah, Rebecca, he dug wells, good. He was a man of faith. And I think of deep faith. You have to be pretty deep faith to be one of the most mentioned people ever in probably the history of the world. I mean, the name Isaac comes up a lot, along with God and Abraham and Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Even though he's sandwiched and easy to bounce over, he was significant. For most of us, I think Isaac's story should be probably our story. So much in our culture, they want 15 minutes of fame. Maybe you want it. Maybe I want it. I want significance. But it's not so much the significance, it's a selfish fame that people are looking for. They're not looking for the promises of God, they're looking for, I want people to notice me. The difference being the followers of Jesus Christ go, I want people to look at God. And Isaac, even though we might view him as insignificant, through his disciplines, through the way that he conducted his life, through the way that he meditated on God, he built his strong family with trust, he prayed for God's will, and he lived into God's promise. He did all those things, and we could just be like, oh, he just played a role. Well, folks, most of us are role players. Past few years, I've gotten into a sport and started caring about a sport called hockey. Now, some of you are probably fairly unfamiliar with that sport, and that's okay. I've gotten into it mostly because I like this team called the Blackhawks, and they are doing really well in the past few years. But there's an interesting thing about hockey that's a little bit different than a lot of other sports. And that is, when the game is played, there are 5 people from each team on the ice, besides the goalie. Many of you are familiar with that. But the strange thing is, as compared to other sports, is that even though there are 5 people on the ice at a given time, that there are another 15 people sitting on the bench waiting to get in the game, and all 20 of those people could be on the ice within 2 minutes. Because every few seconds they change them out. They change out 5 guys, they get out, another 5 come in. Oh, they change those 5 out, another 5 come in. Change those 5 out, another 5 come in. And it happens over and over again. Most sports, you leave your stars in the whole game. You want your people who are the best out there all the time. But in hockey, the stars don't get to stay out there because it's so taxing, it takes so much energy. So instead of 5 guys on the ice, there are 20 guys rotating in all the time. Now the Blackhawks in 2010 won the Stanley Cup. They won it all. And after that year, they lost, not their stars. They have the same stars today that they've had. Matter of fact, they have the same goalies that they had last year. But for the past few years, they didn't win it. And this year, they're doing incredible. They have the best record in the NHL. But the thing that changed for them in the intervening years between 2010 and this year are the role players. Are the other 15 guys that come and go. The other 15 guys that, you know the name of maybe the top 5 stars, but the other 15 kind of come and go. But this year they have the role players that make the difference. Just like they did in 2010. Will they win the Stanley Cup? Of course they will. Everybody knows that. But in hockey, you need the role players. And in other sports, you need them too. But they're not nearly as significant because they're not out there all the time. I think that we need to recognize, I know you guys are older and maybe you haven't gotten sucked into that need for significance or 15 minutes of fame. But I bet plenty of you watched America's Funniest Home Videos. Anybody here send one in back in the day? Maybe you were looking for a neighbor on one of those. You're like, oh, there's my silly neighbor, they did it again. Anyway, but people still have a desire for significance. They want to make a difference. But for most of us, followers of Christ, we are more like Isaac. We are not going to have a big stage. We are not going to be George Beverly Shea. As much as Jack probably wanted to be George, he's probably not going to get there. As much as Ron wanted to be Billy Graham. I don't know, Ron probably doesn't really want to be Billy Graham. As much as we want to be that significant person up front, probably never going to make it. It's going to be doing the little things like Isaac did. Going and meeting with God, hearing His voice, understanding what His promises are, and praying into them. Folks, we need to know our roles. We need to understand where we fit into God's plan. We need to prepare for the future. Many of us don't even prepare for the future. We go, we want what I want right now. And we forget that God has a long story. Who knows how long it will be? I don't know. We may go to other planets before He comes back. Who knows? But God has a story that is significant in Jesus Christ. And if we know our role that God has for us, our place in that story will be significant. It will make a difference for us and the generations following us. Every person that we speak into. Know the voice of God. Know your faith. Live your faith and pass it on.